You might have or haven't seen the class adjustment released by the official, but do you really understand the details? In this video, I will explain it one by one, and give my opinion about each of the adjustments. I will also give a score that summarizes the whole change to become your consideration when choosing a class for next season. First, we have Herbalist. Toxin Mastery Poison damage is decreased by 50%. While Master of Potion duration and buff is increased. Virulent Flask. Explosive and area damage is increased. Toxic Cloud cooldown is getting shorter, but the damage is decreased and the interval of each hit is increased. Replenish got consumption reduction, but we don't even use this skill, so it's kinda useless. Leafstorm consumption is never a problem, but they reduced its damage. Overall, the adjustment is mixed between buff and nerf. They nerfed 3 main skills for Herbalist-based class, and compensate for it in the other areas. So my final score is that Herbalist got medium nerf. Next, we have Tempest Mage. Smooth Sailing got massive buff on its probability. Shatter got its damage almost doubled, the interval shrinked by half, and add a defense reduction effect. I would say that the Tempest Mage skill adjustment is insane, because both of them are core passive skills used by all its prestige class, so my score for Tempest Mage is major buff. Next, we have Aegis. Indemnity Teller increased the resolve buff for 5 seconds, and now you can all damage bonus if the resolve is full. Shield Bash got massive damage increase, but I doubt that we won't use this skill in the first place, and Steadfast also got massive damage increase, especially the added effect. Steadfast damage was really bad before, but it might become decent after getting adjustments. I would say Aegis skill adjustment are decent, but we might need to wait for the actual results. So my score for Aegis is medium buff. Next we have Pyromancer. Pyroclad got overall increases to its activation, cooldown, shield, and damage. This adjustment looks cool, but the nature of the skill itself is not the best out there. Don't laugh at the 6 points of damage reduction. This new added buff to Conflagration will give massive boost to Pyromancer-based class damage. Both are core skills, and these changes are beneficial, so my score for Pyromancer class adjustment is medium buff. Next we have Animancer. Mortal Pact seems to have nerfed, but actually having 0.2 second interval for each summons is not really a problem. Thanatosis now added minion damage reduction, which is quite nice. Overall the change isn't much, so I will give a score of minor buff. Now we are talking about prestige class. First, Druid. Wildheart got its poison damage decreased. Overwhelm damage got major nerf. Tenacity limit also decreased. And lastly, Bear transformation calculation becomes totally different from before, with lower percentage. As a compensation, this skill now gives defense value. But I think it's kinda useless against stronger enemies, so in my opinion, Druid got fucked up next season because there are too many nerf, either from the skill itself or modifier mechanism. My score for Druid adjustment is major nerf. Next we have Shinobi. Shadow Mimesis calculation is increased slightly. The dodge rate of Smokescreen Jutsu is increased significantly. And lastly, there are noticeable decreases on both of summoning skills. The adjustment are focused on giving more dodge and critical, but weakening the summons in general, so I will score Shinobi as medium nerf. Next we have Wildwalker. There is an increase for Toxic Bloom mana consumption. Increased skill cooldown for him to Gaia. Increased skill cooldown for Feral Aspect. Activation speed for Breath of the Wild becomes slower. Major increase for Terra Slam damage and cooldown. And lastly, stats decrease for Lifesprig. Overall they all got nerfed, and either developers want players to shift into using Terra Slam as the main skill. So my score is medium nerf. The next class is Assassin. Increased damage for Merciless. Added new effect to save stealth charge. Shorten the cooldown for evasive stance and increase the movement speed. Increased dodge chance for riposte. Major buffs for Mana Reaver, free consumption, increased damage, and added mana steal effect. Increased critical damage from Killer Instinct. All of Assassin's skills got buffed. And the developers encourages the players to highlight Mana Reaver as a main skill. So I will score Assassin's adjustments, major buff. Next we have Heretic. Unquenchable Ardor skill interval got shortened. Now Incinerating Vortex is affected by Blowout Fatebound, shortened skill delay, and increased its damage. And the minion power calculation for summoning Hydra is increased. Overall the adjustments are quite favorable, and it's plain to see that the developers encourages players to use Incinerating Vortex since long time ago. So my score for Heretic is medium buff. Next we have Soul Guard. The activation rate and damage of this skill is increased. Increased duration and speed for animated phalanx. And the transferred damage is increased for Semper Fidelis. Overall the adjustments are focused on survival, so I will score these slight changes as minor buff. Next we have Pyroknight. The damage from Scorching Breath is slightly increased. And the nature of Blazing Soul is changed. From providing bonus fire damage into extra fire damage. These two adjustments could be good for you, depends on your modifier stats, counted as a slight boost from the previous adjustments. So I will score this changes as minor buff. Next we have Artillerist. Increased fire damage of rapid fire but increased its mana consumption. Keep in mind that this skill will suck your mana dry so fast. Major buff on adhesive gunpowder explosive damage. Added new buff to spawn fire speed for rain of arrows. Changed the nature of Pyrostigma skill into hybrid attack power. This could be either good or bad news, depends on your build. So overall the adjustment bring massive increase, but with a price. So I will judge the Artillerist adjustments as major buff. Now we will talk about Stormwarden. The change for this skill is insane, increasing bludgeon and cold damage. Adding extra cold damage on top of existing cold damage. Adding extra shock damage on top of existing shock damage. Massively increase the defense conversion from cold and shock resistance. Overall, these adjustments almost making Stormwarden becomes twice as strong as before, and I think this class got buffed the most out of every other classes, so I will rate this adjustment as insane buff. Next we have Stormblade. Adding new effect on hyperconductivity to deal shock damage. Even though it's the only adjustment that Stormblade has, the effect will increase the overall damage output. So I will rate this as medium buff. And we have Elementalist here. Now Dipole Discharge will add fire or cold damage depending on the situation. This skill is similar to hyperconductivity, which will increase massive overall damage for Elementalist. So I will also rate this as medium buff. Last but not least, Ranger. This one might be confusing, because there is no onslaught skill on Ranger. Anyway, the new added effect also great as passive skill, so I will rate this as medium buff. Sigh. Finally it's done, I'm tired of speaking. This is the summary of everything. And that's it for the video. Honestly, I have so much things to share, but it seems the time is running out before the season 2 comes. Which class will you pick later? Please let me know in the comment section. See you next time.